Hello everybody. Welcome to another Enigma Mode live stream. I will say this is the first time that I genuinely was busy enough doing other things that I really want to play some Valheim. Like just normal. I want to putz around in the village and build some stuff and make some better gear and just do normal stuff. I feel like I've been doing so much moderation in these things. But I do have a lot to talk about. So today, I figure while I'm putzing around in the village, I'm going to talk about server management because I learned so much over this weekend about some problems and how to fix them. So why not talk about what I learned while I'm doing some more kind of boring base stuff. That way, those of you who have been around on Path of Magic and experienced all these issues over the past week or two can understand where they come from, and those of you running servers yourselves can know how to prevent them. So just give me a moment here. I'm gonna be all smart, and I'm going to get a rested buff. Where's the forge? Ayo, nice. All right, one moment here. I need to set up my chair better. I don't have a standing desk, but I put a computer screen at the standing height using various objects, right? I'm always kind of amused when people say, oh, you can't get a standing desk. What do you mean? You can stack objects on top of each other, right? You can definitely stand when you use the computer, and I personally recommend it. It should be you stand more often and you sit just a little bit. I found that standing also is harmful, though. Ultimately, you have to move around. There's no way around it. But by distributing standing and sitting, you can have a better time using the computer. That's something I have to manage because, well, most of my life is on the computer. So if something happens and then I can't use it, I have to deal with a lot of problems. So when I get sick or get headaches, I lose my ability to use the computer for like a day or two. And that punishment has taught me how to avoid it. Makes sense? So that's why I talk about these things. But today what I want to talk about is it seems that we figured out the problem that was causing everything to restart. So the server over the weekend, it crashed like, I don't know, like 10 times, 12 times. It was kicking people off and then not restarting. It was crazy. And the funny thing is that I hadn't changed anything on Sunday, and it all kind of started really happening yesterday. It was weird for like a week or two, but then really yesterday it became unplayable and was restarting constantly, like every 10-20 minutes. At first I thought it was every time it saved, but then I saw that no, it was actually just like anytime somebody logged in or logged out, and I was like, oh shit. What the fuck is happening here? Because normally a problem will show up right as you update. So you'll throw a bunch of scripts on the server, and then players will do something really soon, shortly after that, and that will reveal your mistake. It normally happens quite quickly, or at least the first time a player uses or interacts with a script, right? But it's also complicated because there's other things that can be done, like when this is a public server, so anyone can use mods, right? And that like makes it so that everything's exponentiated more. I like learn about every possible problem that way, because when people are able to just freely use mods, they create a lot more, they move a lot faster, they do kind of more stuff, if that makes sense, right? So in this case, what was happening is it wasn't like there was a particular mod causing a problem, although it's easy to think and assume that, right? And there are a lot of mods that cause problems, but basically what's happened is that in Path of Magic, or in Enigma Mode servers in general, people use carts constantly, like all the time. Everyone uses carts. Probably because the carts, let me find one, here we go. The carts are bigger, they have a lot more health, and they don't get bothered by metal as much. So you can have a whole bunch of metal in your cart and move it around. And it's kind of like your cart's just full of wood in normal Valheim, if that makes sense. It's not like a big fuss or something. So I had made a mistake in the paving script a while ago that made it so the cargo crates from carts would get destroyed. And this caused a game-breaking experience. You can imagine, like, if you fill a huge cart up with stuff, it's incredibly useful, right? But that also means if the player loses it, they feel like a part of them is gone. It's a very violent experience that doesn't normally happen in Valheim. The closest thing would be something like a player losing a tombstone. And if you know historically about Valheim, you know how much of a problem that was back in the day. You could argue that Iron Gate focused for a whole arc of their development on just making sure the tombstones are always findable. They never end up in something. They're never thrown off to some place you can't reach. And you'd be surprised how much you have to think about to cover all the possible things tombstones can show up in. That's why in Enigma, the tombstone recoil points, they only work because I only use where the player has already been. And it's probably safe to move the tombstone to a spot that the player stepped on already. Make sense? So I kind of like bypass the issue because the player's already there and I make the spot where they already are. But when you die normally in Valheim, like what if you die 100 feet in the air? What if you die underwater in the ocean? What if you die in a place that you then, like, your tombstone goes into an invincible object? Like, there's so many different situations that they had to account for. So the same kind of thing happened with the carts. And basically, I had a error or a misunderstanding in the Enigma paving script a month ago, or like 3 or 4 weeks ago was when I found it. And it would destroy a cargo crate if it was created directly on top of the path. So it wasn't even about carts. It was that the cargo crate has a component in it called destructible, and that is the same component that like rocks have in them, or something like that. So because of that, it was getting auto-removed, therefore deleting all of the player's items without them getting any chances to, right? So I found the cause of that, but then in a classic case of trying to fix a situation by making it worse, I was like, well, wouldn't it be great if the server saved a list of the player's most recent carts so that if something else happens in the future, I can just load their most recent cart. I can restore it really easily. It won't be a problem. And I thought that would be great. But now it seems that it's better to just resolve the situation that destroys the stuff in the first place, because now I found a whole other thing. And this is actually a good learning lesson. So I'm not fussed that this happened. I actually, even though it was an intense weekend, I wouldn't say it was a stressful weekend, because it was very interesting, and I had a feeling that this was going to show like how something works that I didn't understand. And so basically what I was doing was I was making it so every time the player triggered the cart, like if I go over here and I start like punching the cart, it makes that noise, right? So now the server noticed I'm punching something, and there you go. Now it says I'm carting, right? That's because that noise that the cart makes when something hits it is what it uses to be like, hey, yo, this person is taking a cart around. And when it does that, it would basically poke the player and save a key to the server that is the contents of the cart. But because that sounds good in theory, but in practice, you can't just do that. Because if you do that, that's great. But the moment they interact with an empty cart, then all of that saving is gone, right? So you have to not just make a current one, you have to make something that logs maybe 4 or 5 of them. Or you have to make it so it does snapshots, only doing it once every couple of hours. You have to filter it a lot, right? But the funny thing about that is it actually works fine. And in vanilla, it works fine. There's no problems with If you, especially if you have smaller carts, you can do that. You can save the cart's strings. It doesn't matter. But on Path of Magic, not only are there really deep, or in Enigma as well, not only are there really deep storage containers, but there's also these customized equipment and weapons and armor, right? Like you see this hammer. This makes really long item strings. And so when you fill up a chest that's already got extra spaces and you have empowered items in it, it can make an item string that's so long it actually reaches the max character limit for an item string in the game, which is like 64,000 something something. Or 65k. I don't remember what exactly the magical number is. But essentially, because of that, you exponentiate the data I exponentiate the data. If by allowing players to have lots of containers with lots of customized items in them, and then trying to save those regularly, it made the EWP data file be so big that the server would take time every time it refreshed the file to look at it. That is fine if you're not looking at the file every time players do basic things. So it's not like I found a hard limit. I found a soft limit of the EWP data file. And I know how it works now because I tested it more. And basically, it doesn't really care about like how many entries are in the file. And I guess one second, let me actually show you the file I'm talking about, because I realize, yeah, people won't always know this. So normally, if you're familiar with scripting, or let's assume you're not, let's assume you don't know, then EW scripts basically have two files. There's data files, and then there's script files, or prefab files. Hello, Fish and Fire, by the way. Sorry I didn't say hello earlier, Fire. I saw your message. I was just ranting. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, in addition to that, there are these other kinds of files. One moment. Okay. So now you can see my screen, right? This is the EWP data file. I can't zoom in there. You'll just have to take my word for it. This is not the same. I know it's confusing because I just told you there's data files and prefab files. This is, okay, see this data YAML? This is like the normal data we're used to. What I'm talking about is server data. This is EWP data. These are keys. They're like how the server keeps track of what players have or haven't done before, right? So basically what I discovered is that this file has a limit. It's not on the quantity of entries. So you might think, oh, 1,200 entries, that's a lot. Yeah, that is a lot, but it doesn't matter. That's not what caused the problem. Here we can see a normal file. You don't need to look at each of these things. Just notice the length of each line. You can imagine how, like, yeah, more entries means more data, but so does more length in each entry. Makes sense? More characters. So you can imagine how one line being 10,000 characters or whatever, I mean, that's almost the same as, like, this whole document. Okay, not really. Maybe it's the same as, like, maybe up to, like, you know, 500 or 1,000 or something. The point is that there's a limit on the size of this file because, and let me explain why this matters. So basically, that file is looked at by the server, and that check needs to be able to happen very quickly for the experience to be smooth. So if you have, let's say, a 50 kilobit file, it's probably fine. But what I found is once the file gets up to be like 200 kilobits, 300, 400, then all of those problems start to happen. So what we experienced over the weekend was an accumulation of this file. And the reason it was accumulating faster is because of the difference between this and when it is full of cart strings. So I'll show you real quick, and then I'll get back into Valheim. I'll just show you how different it looks, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Okay. So now we're switching back over. Okay, here we have a culprit file. This is the one that was causing the problem, and here we have the normal file. So in the culprit file, we can see there's 13,000 entries. In the cleaned file, there's 1,300 entries, and now there's 1,200, okay? It's not that different. It's only 50. It's not the number of entries. Scroll up. You see these? You see these strings? These may look normal, but let's try and find the ends of some of them. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's see how long this one is. So this one string is 1,684. And believe it or not, that actually isn't as big as some of the ones I was able to make in testing. I was able to get strings to be like 40,000 characters by filling ultra carts up with lots of empowered items, lots of different empowered items, lots of items with custom text. Because the custom text has like it has a lot of different adjustments that make this kind of thing really expensive. If that makes sense. And so you can see like here, for example, as well. This added so much extra data that if I were to, I won't show you the file itself, but basically that made the file get too big. So on one hand, we had an intense weekend and I have to replace some stuff, and I'll deal with that probably after this stream, by the way. I'll go through the reports and deal with whatever people lost in these things. But this also explains why the server has been more unreliable for the 2 weeks before that. Because since it was, I noticed when I was streaming that like, this is kind of bad. I've been streaming and showing off this custom world, and like for 3 worlds times in a row, like the world's just crashed within like 20-30 minutes of me streaming. Or like been very clear problems, right? So it looks like that was from the cart saver. It's just the cart saver needed lots of players to use it to really show the limitations of the data file. Make sense? So now it's all good. I mean, maybe I'll be proved wrong and I'll get a disconnection icon and then the server will crash, but I'm pretty positive because I tested it. I was able to have it booted fine for an hour, and then I made some adjustments, and then the others were playing Index and I saw someone else on. I don't remember who they were playing. So probably, or Darko, yeah, Index and Darko were playing. So probably it's fine now. I think it's all good. It was just that one file had way too much data in it. And normally that doesn't matter because it just loads up the prefabs when it loads up the prefabs. But there were things that were checking every time a player would empower, every time certain events would happen. And that was making a whole bunch of unnecessary like network traffic, basically. So now that's all resolved. And now I know that there is a limit in the hundreds of kilobits for the EWP data file. I don't know exactly where it is, but I know it's between 48 kilobits and 360. How big is it? Let me look at the file again. It's 330. Yeah, okay. So the one that caused the problem was a 45 KB file. Or no, sorry, the one that's fine is 45 KB. No problems there. And that's still pretty big for an EWP data file. That's like 1,200 entries. The one that caused the actual problems was 330 KB. So this is still actually quite small in terms of like user memory, like what you're all used to on your phones and like USB drives and stuff. We're talking about like 1/3 of a megabyte being too big, right? But you have to remember that like in networking and these things, it may seem like it's only 1/3 of a megabyte, but when something happens every, 100 milliseconds or even every second, it adds up really, really quickly, especially if you lose connection. Then this like piling up of unsent data occurs, right? And then the network has to figure out like, oh, okay, when I gain connection back, what do I do with that unsent data? What do I do with the parts of it that I'm not sure about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all things that have to do with why Valheim has the networking issues it does. There's a whole other project that this also I'm inspired by, but I don't want to get too much into that. I have a feeling I shouldn't rush that project and I should just kind of chill. I'll probably do some kind of stress testing of a new biome distribution soon. So maybe in like 2 weeks or a week, I'll invite people on one of the streams with like a bunch of gear and crazy stuff to purposefully try and lag the server out and cause problems. And basically we'll test if okay, how do I explain this? I want to figure out, is it possible to make Valheim a good multiplayer experience using their existing bad networking? Maybe instead of thinking we can rework the networking, what we can do is rework the amount of stuff we send through it. So a lot of the biomes in the games have between 3,000 and 6,000 instances. So what if it's only 600? I don't need to figure out the best way for it to look. What I have to figure out is, okay, let me put it this way. If 4 or 5 of us can play around like a goblin camp and it not be laggy or not be problematically laggy, I think it's probably worth reworking all of Valheim's vegetation and every biome to use as few things as possible to maximize the available network for combat and players' buildings. I have this strong sense that because Iron Gate developed for like single player Valheim or with a couple other people, we have to keep in mind that like for us to play in multiplayer the way we want, we probably have to redo what they did with the vegetation because they didn't develop it to be like a multiplayer server experience. They didn't develop it to be a server. So we need to rework Valheim's distribution, not just of vegetation, but also of locations, so that they're further away from each other and they focus more on respawning one location instead of finding 3 or 4 next to each other. We have to rework it from the ground up. I know all these things are possible. The thing we have to figure out, though, is would it even work, right? Because it'll take a long time to balance and readjust all of the vegetation to get it where it, like, it'll feel different. There's no way for it not to feel different, but it should feel good, right? And Valheim's beauty is important. It can't just be removed, right? So that's a whole thing. It needs to. I've been working on that. I've been trying to get people to help out with that. I've been getting feedback with it. But that's a whole thing that like would take time and even more iterations to do properly. So really what needs to be done is we need to figure out, is it worth it? Right? Like, can you have a couple people from all over the world playing together, fighting a goblin camp, if there's only like 1,000 instances, including the goblin camp? You see what I'm saying? Because like there's so many things in Valheim that are so cool. Like I love the Charred Fort experience, But then, like, the game's so laggy that, like, how are you supposed to really have fun with strangers freely just playing with 2 or 3 friends in a combat experience when you know that, like, it's gonna fuck everything up and make it really challenging, and you'll just randomly die sometimes and you won't even see the enemies. Like, it's just sad, you know? Like, and so that's why I feel like it's probably worth it. Even, like, I look at it this way, like, if you'd have to rework the whole vegetation distribution, right? So even if we did that, what would it would only be worth it if it actually makes a difference, you know what I mean? So you know what? I feel like showing you the rework. So here you go. I'll just show you guys the vegetation rework that I've been working on. But before I do, I need to let's get some. I need to log out, log into the thing. Give me a moment here. Yeah, it feels right. People have asked about it, and I have iterated it many times now. And Teensy and Crew and a couple others have all given feedback. So what we're gonna do is I need to make it so I'm using, I need upgrade world, server Devcommands, and oh no, I need to be in a totally different profile. One second. I don't know if the streaming thing's like when I just have a black screen like this. Here we go. I've noticed sometimes they kind of like cut out when I do that. So just give me a moment. I'm changing my mod profile to the current version of this rework. Right now it's contained within Enigma, the next Enigma patch, but I'm really not like, I don't think I'm gonna include this in Enigma, just because it's, you'll see what I mean. Like, it definitely, how do I put it? We can rework Valheim and make it still feel like Valheim. It's definitely possible. But as you'll see, it's a bit problematic. I guess I can use the same world probably. You have to like, basically you get rid of too much stuff. You get rid of almost everything. And then you go look around and you ask yourself what's missing, what feels wrong. And then you start adding stuff back in, but kind of like as little as possible. So this has to be done a lot by many of us until we kind of get a sense for how we want things to look. So I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm not happy with the meadows yet. There's other biomes I'm happy with, but not really the meadows. So give me a moment here. Bum 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 bum. Okay. Nice. Okay. Yeah, I'll be using a map so I show you what's going on. It feels wrong, to be honest, but hey, it is what it is. I'm totally aware I decided to then do development stuff, but I figured, fuck it, may as well. It felt right, and I know some of you mentioned being interested in this. So first things first, this is Enigma. So the center of the world in Enigma will always be 2 instance heavy. So it's not a good place to necessarily test things, just because you're gonna have these 4 paths that are all in the same loaded zone. So you can see right now, even with everything being removed, I have like 2,700 instances. That's almost all path material. And you can see that if you just go objects, count, and then zone max distance equals 2. This is going to tell you, of those instances, what are they? What are those instances? We can see that we have 1,000 iron floors, and then like another 1,000 black marble pieces. So that's 2,000 of them right there. That means really this area is like 600. So if you actually look at longer, just so fire his comment, it's funny. If you actually look at the longer, sorry, not longer, we got to get away from the center. Let's get away from these paths so you can get a sense of what this looks like in a more organic area. If you're used to Valheim, you can probably already tell, like, it's definitely more empty. And like, so here, for example, let's go into like the thick of the Black Forest, right next to a stone tower, okay? And there's another kind of structure over there. An area like this in Vanilla Valheim is between 5,500 and 7,000 instances. So I haven't showed you the instance count yet, but you can look around and like, if you're not used to Valheim, you might not notice straight away, but if you're used to Valheim, you'll notice like there's less density, like significantly less density, and also the assets are a lot bigger. There's a scarcity. Makes sense? So it's still a forest, but then we look at our instances and we have 1,700. And keep in mind, this is being next to one of these stone things and also having another one off in the distance. And that's what I was trying to explain as well. Like, you can't just reduce the vegetation density. You have to also reduce the location density. But in doing this, you're going to create a new vacuum. Because Vanilla Valheim motivates players to find areas with lots of crypts and lots of locations. It incentivizes them to crave high instance areas with multiple positions. This in itself is where they begin to shoot themselves in the foot. We have to rework it so that it distributes locations further apart, but in doing so, we create a gap. So how do we deal with that gap? Luckily, Enigma just so happens to have already dealt with it. So that's why for me, this project is so interesting, because I already realized a while ago, because I did the opposite. I fucked up and made mistakes with Path of Magic, that Valheim runs a lot better if you have one respawning dungeon that's deep compared to having 3 or 4 dungeons in an area that the player goes and travels between. That does not function well. Valheim can't handle more than one combat area in a loaded zone. So you have to separate all combat areas and keep them away from each other to kind of maximize the networking situation, right? And so exactly, fire's on point there. It feels exactly. It's like, I have a feeling that in single-player Valheim, it'll always be the most beautiful version of the game. Make sense? But I think that for multiplayer servers, I just have this feeling that the emptiness is abrasive at first. But then if you think about it, the problems in Valheim often come from building too much, right? So what if the world starts more empty? Doesn't that mean you can build 2,000 or 3,000 more instances before you notice any problems? Doesn't that mean that when you have a combat experience, you're less likely to see rubber banding? Because even though your partner is in some other country, you know, there's only, right now in this spot, there's 1,600 instances, right? And this is with some locations. There's a Great Orc Nest, some other things. Although, right now I have Ghost Mode on. Or, yeah, like, so there's, like, not many monsters. Don't be concerned. That has nothing to do with anything I've changed. It's just, like, Valheim makes monsters around you and it tricks you into thinking there are more than there are, because it starts empty, and then as the player moves around, monsters occur around the player as they're running. But if you're just flying around, like, you're not gonna necessarily activate all of the spawners. Make sense?